Welcome to this deep dive.
Oh, cool.
We're going to be exploring the chilling world of totalitarian thinking.
Right.
Our primary source material is coming from the lectures of Dr. Joost A. Meerloo,
Okay.
a Dutch psychiatrist who escaped Nazi-occupied Europe.
Wow.
He spent his life trying to understand how totalitarian regimes psychologically manipulate people. His book, The Rape of the Mind, is just chock full of insights into how these systems work
Right.
and the terrible impact they have on individuals and societies as a whole.
Yeah. You know what's fascinating about Meerloo's work is that he doesn't just describe totalitarian regimes.
Uh-huh.
He goes further and explores how these same techniques can kind of creep into everyday life,
Oh,
even in societies that consider themselves democratic.
right.
And often it happens in such subtle ways that we might not even realize it's happening.
Okay, so let's break this down.
Yeah.
To start, we need a clear definition of totalitarianism.
Right at its heart, totalitarianism is about the relentless pursuit of absolute power and the complete domination of every aspect of life.
Wow.
Political, social, economic, and even psychological.
Okay.
It's a system that just crushes dissent, suppresses individuality,
Yeah.
and controls every facet of a person's existence.
It's almost hard to imagine why anyone would be attracted to that kind of system.
That's the paradox that Meerloo highlights.
Okay.
Humans have this duality. We crave maturity and freedom,
Mm-hmm.
but we also have this very childish desire for security and this yearning to avoid responsibility.
So it's like wanting to have it both ways.
Exactly. And totalitarian systems are really good at taking advantage of that duality.
Uh-huh.
They offer these simple solutions to complex problems, promising security purpose and belonging in exchange for just unquestioning obedience.
Right.
They find these scapegoats to channel people's frustrations and anxieties.
Okay.
And they use this shared hatred and fear to create a sense of unity.
Oh, it's like they're tapping into our most basic instincts,
Yeah.
like the need for easy answers and someone to blame.
Meerloo details all sorts of techniques
Right.
that are used for what he calls menticide,
Okay.
which is the systematic destruction of an individual's mind and independent thought.
Wow.
And one of the most powerful is terror.
Okay.
Totalitarian regimes use this constant threat of imprisonment, violence, and public humiliation to paralyze people and crush any thought of dissent.
And he also talks about these cyclical purge rituals that totalitarian regimes use.
Right. These purges are crucial for maintaining an atmosphere of fear
Mm-hmm.
and enforcing complete obedience. They involve publicly humiliating
Right.
and often eliminating individuals who are perceived as threats to the regime,
Oh, wow.
even if those threats are completely made up.
Meerloo emphasizes that it doesn't even matter if the accusations are true or not.
Exactly.
The act of public accusation and confession forces people to be submissive and redirects their aggression outward toward a common enemy.
Right.
It creates this feeling of relief, like, at least it's them and not me.
Yeah.
And it serves as a warning to anyone who even thinks about stepping out of line. So totalitarianism thrives on suspicion and distrust,
Yes.
turning even family and friends against each other.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Meerloo describes how totalitarian regimes deliberately create an environment of constant surveillance and paranoia.
Wow.
Neighbors are encouraged to report on each other.
Really?
Children are taught to inform on their parents.
That's awful.
And the possibility of betrayal is always present.
Right.
This completely destroys the foundation of trust within families and communities.
Meerloo even found an example of this type of thinking in his anthropological research.
Oh, wow.
He writes about the Pueblo Indians,
Okay.
who believe that if even one person did something wrong or even thought the wrong thing,
Wow.
it could disrupt the cosmic balance and harm the entire community.
Oh, no.
So they spied on each other constantly, always looking for any sign of someone deviating from the norm.
It's a powerful example of how this mindset can completely take over a culture.
Right.
It shows how dangerous groupthink can be and how strong the pressure to conform is, even in societies that aren't outwardly totalitarian.
And that's what's so unsettling.
Yeah.
The parallels Meerloo draws between totalitarian regimes and everyday life make you wonder, are we as free from these manipulative tactics as we think we are?
That's the question that sticks with you.
Right.
Meerloo goes into some really disturbing detail about how totalitarian regimes intentionally blur the lines of morality,
Okay.
encouraging people to betray their loved ones and even commit acts of violence in the name of loyalty to the state.
It's like they're twisting people's sense of right and wrong.
Exactly. He calls this tactic criminalization.
Okay.
It's about conditioning people to accept and even participate in actions that they would normally see as morally wrong.
Right.
All under the guise of a higher purpose or ideology.
And they manipulate language to achieve their goals. Right?
Absolutely.
Mm.
Meerloo talks about verbocracy and semantic fog.
Okay.
These are ways of manipulating language through propaganda double talk and the constant repetition of slogans.
Right.
The goal is to control people's thoughts and create a distorted reality.
So they're basically changing the meaning of words.
Yes, it's about controlling the narrative, twisting meanings, and ultimately replacing facts with made-up truths that serve their agenda.
Wow.
This constant bombardment of propaganda and distorted language wears down people's ability to think critically and tell the difference between truth and lies.
He gives the example of the Nazi concept of Gleichschaltung, which means coordination or synchronization. On the surface, it sounds harmless, but in reality, it was the process of bringing every aspect of German life, education, media, culture, under the control of the Nazi Party.
It's a stark reminder that language can be used as a weapon.
Right.
The Nazis were experts at using seemingly innocent language to hide their true intentions.
Meerloo's descriptions of life under a totalitarian regime are truly terrifying.
Yeah.
He talks about the psychological effects of living under constant fear and surveillance, leading to what he calls the robot man.
The robot man is Meerloo's term for an individual who has been stripped of their individuality, their ability to think critically, and their capacity for independent action.
Wow.
They become like machines.
Right.
Programmed to follow the commands of the state without question.
It's disturbing to think that a system could have that much power over a person.
It is. And it's even more disturbing when you consider that Meerloo draws parallels between this totalitarian mindset and schizophrenia.
Oh, really?
He points to the similarities in their retreat from reality, their dependence on authority figures, and their potential for self-destruction.
It's a chilling thought.
Indeed. And it's especially troubling.
Yeah.
Because Meerloo argues that these dangers aren't limited to totalitarian states.
Okay.
He warns that the techniques employed by dictators can be adopted by power-hungry individuals in any society, even democracies like ours.
So we're not immune.
Not at all. Meerloo points to the way trials and investigations can be manipulated to intimidate and control people, how accusations of brainwashing can be used as a form of mental blackmail.
Okay.
And how the right to silence a cornerstone of individual liberty can be attacked.
What does he mean by mental blackmail?
He's talking about how the idea of brainwashing itself can be used as a weapon.
Okay.
Especially in legal situations.
Right.
He describes cases where people were accused of brainwashing or unduly influencing others, often in situations where someone simply felt they'd been wronged or manipulated in some way.
So it's like using the fear of brainwashing as a way to control someone.
Exactly. It's a form of psychological manipulation.
Wow.
That plays on people's anxieties about their own mental autonomy.
That's a really disturbing idea. It raises important questions about how we protect our own mental freedom and resist the creep of totalitarian thinking in our own lives.
Absolutely. What stands out to you most from what we've discussed so far?
What's really hitting home for me is realizing that even democracies can be vulnerable to these subtle forms of mental manipulation. Meerloo's examples of how language can be twisted and how trials and investigations can be used as tools of intimidation are really unsettling.
Those are crucial points. Meerloo's work challenges us to be more vigilant, to question assumptions, and to critically analyze the information we're bombarded with every day.
Right.
We need to recognize that manipulation can take many forms.
Right.
And that even seemingly harmless actions can have unintended consequences.
He also highlights how these techniques are used for non-political purposes, like the manipulative strategies in advertising.
That's a fascinating aspect of his work.
Yeah.
He describes how advertisers use psychological insights to exploit our insecurities and desires, pushing us to buy things we don't need by appealing to our emotions rather than our reason.
He uses terms like sibling rivalry and neighbor envy to describe the kind of primal urges that advertisers tap into.
It's all about creating a sense of inadequacy and then offering their product as the solution.
Right.
It's a subtle form of manipulation, but it's incredibly effective.
And then there's the whole world of public relations and opinion engineering.
That's a critical point.
Yeah.
Meerloo argues that the techniques used to manipulate public opinion are becoming more and more sophisticated.
Okay.
using everything from catchy slogans to subliminal messaging to influence our beliefs and behaviors.
And this was back in the 1950s.
Right.
Imagine how much more advanced these techniques must be today with the rise of social media and the internet.
It's a sobering thought.
Right.
We live in a time of information overload, constantly bombarded with messages from all directions.
Right.
It's more important than ever to develop our critical thinking skills and learn to recognize the signs of manipulation.
It all comes back to Meerloo's point about the importance of cultivating individual conscience and the ability to think critically.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He argues that education and critical thinking
Okay.
are our most powerful weapons against totalitarian thinking and any form of mental manipulation.
So knowledge is power.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But it's not just about accumulating knowledge.
Oh.
It's about learning to think for ourselves,
Right.
questioning authority, and challenging the status quo.
It's about being an active participant in shaping our own thoughts and beliefs,
Yeah.
rather than passively absorbing what we're told.
Precisely. Meerloo's work is a powerful call to action,
Right.
urging us to take responsibility for our own mental freedom
Okay.
and resist the forces that seek to control our minds.
This has been pretty intense so far.
Yeah.
What can we do to protect ourselves from these dangers?
That's a great question.
We'll explore those questions in more detail right after this. So we're talking about protecting ourselves from these really subtle forms of manipulation.
Right.
Meerloo goes into detail about how dictators exploit people's insecurities, their need to belong, and their desire for simple solutions to complex problems.
It's like they offer this escape from the uncertainties and complexities of life.
Yep.
They promise this utopia where everyone has a role and a purpose, free from conflict and uncertainty. It's a powerful draw,
Right.
especially for those who are feeling lost or disenfranchised.
It's like trading freedom for the illusion of security.
Exactly. And Meerloo emphasizes that this trap can be set even in societies that appear free.
Right.
He spends a lot of time talking about what he calls trial by trial,
Okay.
warning us that the judicial process can be a tool for intimidation and thought control.
He uses the chilling example of the Moscow purge trials, where people were forced to confess to crimes they didn't commit,
Right.
often under threat of violence.
Yeah, it's terrifying to think about.
It is.
Those trials were more about spectacle than justice.
Okay.
They were meant to create a culture of fear and obedience,
Right.
sending a message to anyone who might dare to question the regime.
It's about creating a chilling effect that makes people afraid to speak up, even when they know something is wrong. He also draws parallels between those totalitarian tactics and the way investigations can be used in democratic societies, even ours.
Yeah.
He points out how the power to investigate can be used to intimidate witnesses, ruin reputations, and silence dissenters,
Right.
all in the name of national security or the public good.
Meerloo's work is so important because it reminds us to be vigilant, to recognize the signs of creeping authoritarianism, and to protect our democratic values from those who would undermine them.
Meerloo was writing back in the 1950s, but his warnings about technology, particularly mass media, seem even more relevant today.
Oh, absolutely.
He recognized that technology could be a powerful tool for good or for evil. It has the potential to educate and enlighten, but also to manipulate and control.
Right.
His concerns about how passively we consume media and how it can dull our critical thinking resonate even more today.
Yeah.
The age of the internet and social media.
It's almost like he predicted the future. He saw how easily we can become passive consumers of information,
Yeah.
letting others shape our perceptions without us even realizing it.
And now, with the constant bombardment of information from countless sources, it's more crucial than ever to hone our critical thinking skills.
Right.
And be selective about the information we consume.
He uses a phrase that struck me, the mechanization of modern life.
Oh, yeah.
He talks about how modern life, with its focus on efficiency and productivity, can lead to a kind of mental and emotional numbness, making us more susceptible to manipulation.
He's arguing that the very way we live today can make us more compliant and less likely to question authority or the status quo.
Right. He wrote that in modern society, man no longer thinks in personal values. He thinks more and more in the values brought to him by mass media.
That's a pretty sobering thought.
It makes us examine how much of what we think and believe is shaped by outside forces instead of our own critical thinking.
So how do we counter these influences and reclaim our mental freedom?
Well, Meerloo stresses the importance of cultivating what he calls mental immunity.
Okay.
He encourages us to question authority, think critically, and be skeptical of easy answers and simplistic solutions.
Right.
Open dialogue, debate, and the free exchange of ideas are crucial for a healthy society, he says.
He warns us that it is extremely difficult to escape the mechanically repeated suggestions of everyday life. Even when our critical mind rejects them, they seduce us into doing what our intellect tells us is stupid.
Yeah.
So we can't just passively absorb everything we encounter, right?
He's highlighting the need to actively engage with information, challenge our assumptions,
Right.
and be willing to change our minds when presented with new evidence.
He also emphasizes the importance of protecting individual conscience and the right to privacy.
Yes.
Even when facing accusations and pressure to conform.
Those are fundamental rights.
Right.
Meerloo argues that when a society allows those rights to be eroded, it becomes vulnerable to the very totalitarian tendencies he warns against.
It's a powerful reminder that freedom is fragile and that we need to actively defend it.
Meerloo's work isn't just a warning about the dangers of totalitarianism. It's a call to action. He's urging us to be aware of the forces that influence our minds and to take responsibility for safeguarding our own mental freedom.
So what can we actually do to build this mental immunity?
Well, Meerloo highlights a few key areas.
Okay.
First, media literacy is crucial.
Right.
We have to be critical consumers of information, realizing that not everything we read, hear, or see is true or unbiased.
Okay.
He used the term public opinion engineers, arguing that these individuals are skilled at persuasion and manipulation and can effectively sell any idea or product to the public.
And now with the rise of social media and the internet, we're all exposed to these tactics more than ever before.
Yeah.
It's more important than ever to be able to separate fact from fiction, recognize bias, and question the motives behind the information we're presented with.
Exactly. We need to sharpen those critical thinking skills.
Okay.
Be able to analyze information objectively, identify logical fallacies, and recognize attempts to manipulate our emotions.
Right.
Meerloo also emphasizes the importance of developing our own internal compass. Okay. Our own sense of right and wrong.
That makes sense. But how do you develop that kind of moral compass?
It's about engaging in honest self-reflection, figuring out what your values are, and being willing to challenge your own beliefs.
Okay.
It's about finding the courage to stand up for what you believe in, even when it's hard or unpopular.
He also talks about the importance of open dialogue and being willing to consider different points of view.
Right. He calls for the coexistence of contrasting and irreconcilable thoughts as a necessary element of a free society.
It's a powerful idea.
Yeah.
He's arguing that true freedom isn't about everyone agreeing with each other.
Right.
It's about creating a space where people feel safe to disagree, challenge each other's ideas, and engage in the kind of vigorous debate that's vital for a healthy democracy.
That reminds me of another point he makes about the importance of understanding our own internal struggles.
Okay.
The tension between our mature, rational side and our more primitive, childlike desire.
That's a key insight. He argues that we need to be aware of our own vulnerabilities,
Right.
our tendency to seek easy answers and avoid responsibility.
Exactly.
By recognizing these tendencies in ourselves, we can be more resistant to the manipulative tactics that dictators and demagogues use to exploit those weaknesses.
He says that totalitarian systems appeal to the confused infant in all of us.
Wow.
That part of us that craves complete protection and irresponsibility.
It's a powerful image. He's reminding us that even in a democracy, it's easy to fall into the trap of seeking easy answers.
Yeah.
And giving up our autonomy to someone who promises to take care of everything.
Right.
So being aware of that tendency within ourselves is a crucial part of building mental immunity.
Absolutely. It's about recognizing that freedom requires effort,
Right.
critical thinking, and the courage to take responsibility for our own lives and choices.
It sounds like cultivating this mental immunity is a lifelong journey of self-reflection, critical thinking, and engaging with the world in a conscious and intentional way.
Yes.
Where do we even begin?
That's something we'll explore further after a quick break.
So how do we actually start building this mental immunity? Meerloo had a lot to say about the dangers of language, specifically how totalitarian regimes use a tactic he called verbocracy,
Right.
essentially using words as weapons.
It all boils down to, controlling thoughts by controlling the language.
Yep.
These regimes are masters at creating what Meerloo calls a semantic fog,
Right.
twisting and redefining words, stripping them of their true meaning to fit their agenda.
Uh-huh.
Think propaganda, double talk, slogans on repeat,
Right?
all designed to just wear down your critical thinking and make you question your own reality.
It's like taking words, we value words like freedom and democracy that have such positive associations and twisting them into something completely opposite.
Yeah.
He uses the Nazis as a prime example of this, showing how they warped those very concepts.
It's chilling how they can take words with inherent goodness and corrupt them.
Right.
That kind of manipulation is so pervasive and can be incredibly difficult to fight.
What I found unsettling is that Meerloo shows how this manipulation of language isn't limited to totalitarian regimes.
Right.
He sees it happening in advertising, public relations, even in our everyday conversations.
It's a wake-up call for all of us.
Yeah.
Meerloo is urging us to be vigilant, to realize that language, even in subtle ways, can be used to manipulate us.
Right.
We need to be critical of everything we hear and read and be willing to challenge those who try to control our thoughts through the words they use.
He even talks about us becoming symbol agnostics.
Yes.
So bombarded by words and slogans that we lose the ability to think for ourselves.
Exactly. It's like a numbing effect where we stop questioning, we stop analyzing, and we just accept whatever we're told.
Right.
And that makes us incredibly vulnerable to manipulation.
So how do we fight back against this? How do we develop that resistance to verbal manipulation?
Meerloo stresses the importance of mental alertness, a kind of immunity to the manipulative power of words.
Okay.
It starts with awareness, recognizing those techniques being used against us. Then it's about questioning everything, not taking things at face value, and being ready to challenge those who try to control your thinking.
He also talks about the power of reclaiming our own language.
Yes.
Finding ways to express ourselves authentically and honestly, even when faced with those who try to silence us.
It's about taking back control of your own thoughts and words.
Yeah.
Refusing to be defined by the language of manipulation. Finding your own voice and using it to speak truth to power.
Right.
That's where real power lies.
One thing that really struck me about Meerloo's work is his emphasis on individual responsibility. He's saying we can't just sit back and wait for someone else to fix things.
Right.
We have to be active in our own defense.
He's absolutely right. Building and protecting a free society demands action from all of us.
Okay.
Meerloo challenges each of us to sharpen our critical thinking skills, learn to recognize manipulation, and resist those tempting simple answers and scapegoats.
He basically says that speaking out against injustice, even when it's risky or uncomfortable, is our duty.
He sees silence as complicity. We have a moral obligation to challenge those in power and stand up for those who are being oppressed, no matter how difficult it might be.
It's a powerful call to action.
Meerloo's work is a reminder that freedom is precious fragile and requires constant vigilance.
But where does all of this leave us? What are some practical steps we can take to safeguard our mental freedom and stop this totalitarian thinking from creeping into our lives?
Meerloo provides a roadmap. It all starts with awareness.
Okay.
Understanding those manipulative techniques and recognizing how external forces can shape our thoughts.
Right.
We can't be passive consumers of information.
We have to be critical of everything we encounter, skeptical of easy solutions and those who are quick to blame.
Exactly. We have to question authority, speak out against injustice, and stand up for those being silenced.
Right.
It's about taking ownership of our own language, thoughts, and values, being the architects of our own minds, rather than letting others design them for us.
It sounds like a challenging task.
It can feel overwhelming. But Meerloo wouldn't want us to give in to fear or despair. Instead, he urges us to empower ourselves with knowledge, critical thinking, and the courage to stand up for what we believe in.
And he reminds us that we're not in this alone. It's our responsibility to share what we've learned with others. The fight for freedom is stronger with many voices.
You're absolutely right. We're stronger together. We have to engage in open and honest conversations, share our knowledge, and support each other in resisting those who try to control our minds.
As we conclude this deep dive into the world of totalitarian thinking, Meerloo leaves us with a crucial question. What steps will you take to safeguard your own mental freedom?
Yeah.
How will you prevent these dangerous patterns from taking root in your life?
It's a question that demands reflection and action. The choices we make, the information we consume, and how we interact with the world around us will shape not only our individual freedom, but also the future of free societies everywhere.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. We hope it's given you a fresh perspective and inspired you to be more aware and vigilant in protecting your own mental freedom. Remember, keep questioning, keep thinking critically, and keep fighting for the truth.